When the founder of what became Apple today started laying the company's foundation, no one would have thought it would amount to anything worthwhile. For Steve Jobs, success alone wasn't enough. He constantly aimed to put his unconventional ideas to work and bring his dream alive. Although Steve Jobs is not the sole founder of Apple, he had a lasting impact on the company that continues to live even after his death. The story of Apple tells about the unwavering commitment of Steve Jobs to pursue his passion and fantasies without any shade of doubt, even when the circumstances are most unfavorable. If there was anything Steve Jobs was after, it was to change how we view and use computers, and he did it against all odds. Like most successful companies around the world, the start of Apple wasn't an easy bite. The company has gone through the thick and thin of the business world and the ever-growing innovation in the technological market before becoming the world's most valuable company at $2.3 trillion today. Steve Jobs, through Apple, truly changed the way computers work. From the moment when Steve Jobs was born, his future was already uncertain. Growing up as a child, Steve had a very rough start. He was born in California in 1955, but was adopted at a very tender age due to complications between his biological parents. As a child, Steve would hang around his foster father, who was a mechanic and absorbed every detail of his work. As a teenager, Jobs was fascinated by electronics and spent his free time tinkering with computers and other gadgets. As he grew older, his passion for technology became more intense. Steve was consumed with a desire to create something truly revolutionary. He kept on nursing this idea in his mind throughout his teenage years. In 1972, Jobs enrolled at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, but dropped out just after one semester. He returned to California in search of a job. It was during this period that Steve Jobs met what he had always wanted. Back in California, one of Steve's high school classmates named Fernandez introduced him to a promising young technology wizard, Steve Wozniak. Wozniak had just been expelled from the University of Colorado Boulder after his first year for hacking into the school's computer system. While in California, Steve Wozniak was employed by Hewlett-Packard to design a calculator. Steve Jobs also got a summer job at HP during the same period. That was how Steve Jobs met Steve Wozniak, a fellow technician who shared his passion for electronics and computers. The two Steves would later go on to build the first Apple computer. Wozniak, as a young technician, was very brilliant with his technological inventions. He had designed and built his first computer with his friend Fernandez from scratch long before he met Steve Jobs. In 1973, Wozniak designed his own version of the classic video game Pong and gave its electronics board to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs later got employment as a technician at Atari, a video game company, because of that same electronics board that the company thought he designed himself. Jobs continued to share his technical assignment with Wozniak, who gladly helped him out. Besides their profound love of technology, the two Steves had another important obsession that eventually propelled them to fame and fortune. They both wanted to own a personal computer. During those years, computers were still in their early stages of development, and they were in big sizes like the mainframe computer. But the two Steves wanted a portable computer they could carry around. Together, Jobs and Wozniak started working on a project that would eventually become the first Apple computer. In March 1976, Wozniak showed Jobs the design of the computer he had just completed. Jobs suggested that they produce the computer and sell it, but Wozniak doubted the idea and was reluctant. Wozniak later agreed, and they founded Apple Computer Company as a partnership. The company first started in Jobs' bedroom, and they later moved into his parents' garage in Los Altos, California. Getting funds to launch their first computer was not an easy exercise. Jobs had to sell his Volkswagen van, while Wozniak sold his HP scientific calculator to raise some money for their business. They started with a small investment of just $1,300, which they used to build the first prototype of the Apple I computer. After Apple I was launched into the market, it struggled to get a buyer. The computer was the first of its kind, and people doubted its effectiveness. Nobody thought of having a personal computer. The first customer to buy the Apple computer was a computer retailer who ordered 50 units. Steve Jobs had to beg the spare parts seller to grant him the necessary hardware on credit so he could deliver the first 50 orders. Apple I managed to sell just 200 units. The early days of Apple were tough. The company struggled to sell its computers, which were expensive and not very user-friendly. Jobs and Wozniak faced a number of setbacks, including production problems and difficulties finding investors. But they were determined to make Apple a success, and they continued to work tirelessly on improving their products and expanding their business. After the sales of Apple I, the business was not promising enough. They could not get the needed amount to scale up and sell the computer en masse. Steve Jobs set himself on finding an investor for the business at all costs. He went back to his boss at the video game company where he had worked before to seek funding. His boss directed him to a man named Don Valentine, but Valentine was not interested in funding Jobs' computer business. Valentine referred Steve to Mike Markula, a millionaire who eventually agreed to invest in Apple computers. Mike invested $92,000 and took 1/3 of Apple's ownership. In 1977, the company was incorporated, buying out the partnership between Jobs and Wozniak. Michael Scott was appointed the first ever president and CEO of Apple Inc. Jobs and Wozniak were determined to produce computers that would make Apple stand out. They kept on working on new designs and improving the features of Apple I. On June 10, 1977, Apple II was released into the market. The new computer came with improved features and used fewer materials than the previous one, which made it lighter and even more portable. Apple II enjoyed commercial success, selling millions of units. 1 year after the launch of Apple II, the next version, Apple III, was introduced, and it sold an impressive amount due to the reputation the company had established before. In 1980, Apple went public, and Jobs became a millionaire overnight. The company's IPO was the largest since Ford Motor Company went public in 1956, and it made Apple one of the most valuable companies in the world. Jobs used his newfound wealth to fund the development of new products and technologies, including the Macintosh computer and the iPod. After Apple went public, it began to face some of the biggest challenges in the company's history in the computer industry. Another big producer of computers, IBM, who had focused on producing industrial computers, entered the personal computer market. IBM became a tough opponent of Apple when it introduced its brand of personal computers. To complicate things, the Apple III has performed badly compared to the Apple II version due to overheating. Most buyers quickly shifted to IBM, which eventually captured 56% of the personal computer market share in the late 80s. Apple was struggling to find its feet again in the market. In a bid to gain a market comeback, Apple launched the Macintosh in 1984 with an elaborate commercial worth millions of dollars. Macintosh sold well in the first year only, after which sales declined. The company was on the brink yet again. Tension began to grow between Steve Jobs and CEO John Sculley. Both of them had different visions for the company, and they could not find common ground. Their differences were great, and it caused division amongst the board of directors, which divided into two factions, each supporting the CEO and Steve Jobs. John Sculley was able to convince the board of directors to exclude Steve Jobs from some important decisions. In 1985, Jobs was ousted from the company he had founded after a power struggle with Apple's board of directors. Wozniak had left the company earlier in 1983 due to a plane crash accident, which had made Jobs hire PepsiCo's vice president John Sculley as Apple's president. Now Apple was completely without any of its founders. Steve Jobs went on to found a new company, Next Inc., which produced high-end workstations for the education and business markets. Meanwhile, Apple struggled to compete in the highly competitive computer industry. The company's market share declined, and it faced stiff competition from rivals like Microsoft and IBM. Apple struggled for more than 10 years before it brought Steve Jobs back in 1997. Jobs returned to Apple as CEO, and he set about revitalizing the company. Under Jobs' leadership, Apple launched a series of groundbreaking products including the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. These products revolutionized the technology industry and transformed Apple into one of the most successful and innovative companies in the world. The company adopted a smart marketing plan that made its product exclusively for the rich, and people who want to showcase their social status must get Apple products as proof. Apart from introducing new Apple products, Steve Jobs brought his personal philosophy into the operations of Apple, which made the company really successful. Jobs was also known for his attention to detail. He was a perfectionist who demanded the highest standards from his employees and himself. This attitude can be seen in Apple's products, which are known for their quality and reliability. For example, the first iPod was a breakthrough product in the music industry due to its elegant design, ease of use, and long battery life. Jobs was intimately involved in the development of the iPod, and his attention to detail ensured that it was a success. One of Jobs' most notable values was a focus on simplicity. This value can be seen in Apple's products, known for their clean designs and user-friendly interfaces. Jobs once famously said, "Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end because once you get there, you can move mountains." This focus on simplicity was reflected in Apple's marketing campaigns, which often featured minimalistic ads that highlighted the key features of the company's products. He once said, "Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower." This focus on innovation was reflected in Apple's products, which were often groundbreaking and pushed the boundaries of what was possible. For example, the iPhone was a revolutionary product that changed the mobile phone industry forever. Its touchscreen interface, combined with its powerful hardware and software, made it a must-have device for millions of people around the world. Steve Jobs greatly impacted Apple and laid a solid foundation for the success that the company enjoys today. His legacies in Apple will continue to endure for years to come. Apple is one of the most successful companies in the world, but it also has faced its fair share of controversies and legal issues over the years. From antitrust lawsuits to allegations of worker exploitation, there have been several instances where the company's practices have been called into question. In addition to these controversies, Apple has also faced criticism over its environmental practices, its reliance on non-renewable energy sources for its products. However, Apple has taken steps to address these concerns, and the company has set a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. Despite these challenges and controversies, Apple remains a giant in the tech industry. Over the years, Apple has commanded an army of loyal supporters for most of its products. The Apple iPhone is one of the most widely sold smartphones in the world. Today, Apple remains one of the most valuable companies in the world, with a market value of over $2 trillion. This was the story of Apple. And remember, as Steve Jobs once stated, your time is limited, so don't waste it, and subscribe to Business Capital.